Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the That Was Stupid podcast. We have a special guest today that is actually, I think, going to be our longest podcast ever. And I don't say that to scare you. I guess if you want to skip around, you can. If you need to skip around, the second part is, I think, some of the most powerful stuff, but there's great stuff all the way through it. But his name is Brandon Moore, and he's probably not someone you heard of, but he is a former professional baseball player who made it as high as about single A. So there's single A, double A, triple A, and then the major leagues. And but he retired. And now he's actually a spiritual formation pastor at a school. And so he's going to walk us through his story. And I am telling you, there is some incredible stuff. This man's heart is so incredible and so awesome. And I think some of the stuff that he's going to say towards the end about even advice to parents, right? This is a guy who gave every ounce and second of his life to baseball growing up and in his young career. And he's got some advice for parents, especially when it comes to youth sports, and some things that he wants to encourage you in, and some things he wants you to warn you about. So please definitely stay tuned for that. But first, this episode is brought to you by the Veritas Creative. The Veritas Creative is your full-service digital media agency to help you with anything from a book idea to your website. And so if you are interested in even just getting a consult, please go to theveritascreative.com. All right, so Brandon Moore, I'm John Seidel. We're going to have a great conversation. So Brandon, thank you so much for joining the That Was Stupid podcast. I know we were talking a little bit before and you were like, man, I've got a lot of That Was Stupids, which I'm finding is the case, right? Like I kind of like to focus on one or when I reach out to people or get them on the show, it's like, okay, what's that seminal That Was Stupid? And what I'm finding is a lot of people are like, you have no idea how many That Was Stupids I have. Yeah, so we'll get into we'll get into as many as we can, but thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, John, I'm super excited to be on here. Honestly, when you reached out to me, I was like, yeah, that tracks. I've made a lot of stupid decisions, but I'm just super honored, super grateful to have the opportunity to share what God's done in my life.
So let's kind of start with a little bit of an overview. What are you doing now? Where are you living? What does family life look like? Kind of give us that overall picture of Brandon.
Yeah, so I actually started a new job this month, actually, the beginning of this month, I'll be a dean of spiritual development at a private Christian school in Springdale, Arkansas. And so I'll be kind of doing two things. I'll dean of spiritual development, which is coordinating chapels and, teacher, faculty, spiritual growth kind of thing. But also I'll be a 10th grade Bible teacher. So I've never taught in a classroom on a consistent basis before. So this is all, it's all brand new. Every single component of what I'm doing is brand new, other than I get to talk about Jesus. That's the only thing that is consistent with what I'm going to be doing. And so yeah, my family moved up here 2 weeks ago. So we moved into a new house that we're renting, and yeah, it's been good. We're just getting settled, and I've been married to my wife Jackie since 2013. So just over 10 years, and we had twin daughters in November of 22. So they are 19 months old now. So it's a little bit wild. Unpacking all our boxes has taken a little bit longer than it did last time we moved, because we didn't have twin daughters around.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's not like you just have one kid. It's like you have two, and then you have like two of everything,
Yes. Yeah, it has. And we're getting settled, but it's definitely a wild time.
So now we kind of got the overview, but what you're doing now is very different than probably, I think, what you thought you were going to be doing growing up, right? And so where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Arkansas, Western Arkansas.
Okay.
And yeah, I grew up, man, you know how at times we'll kind of chuckle when kids say, when they're younger, that they want to be a professional athlete. Well, I was that kid. Like I knew from a very young age, actually, that I wanted to play professional baseball, and grew up with that entire vision, that thought process, all I wanted to do. And so all of my time went towards being an athlete and professional baseball player. and it worked. I got to play professional baseball. But yeah, I definitely did not expect myself. If you would ask high school Brandon if he would be teaching in a high school, the answer would have been no way. In fact, at this current moment, my plan was to be securing a huge contract at the age of 32, playing professional baseball. And quite frankly, my plan, I think, was to play until I died at whatever age that was. I didn't have a concept for things that could happen after playing professional baseball. I just thought that I was going to play until the end, which is so unrealistic now looking at it. But yeah, no, I'm in a very different spot than I assumed I would be.
So take us through that journey, as a kid, or when did you start realizing like, okay, I want to play professional baseball? When did you start realizing I can play professional? Like I think this is gonna happen.
Yeah. First for me, it was college. The dream was to always get to the big leagues, but the first moment where I was like, oh, I'm actually good and I could probably play in college was after my freshman year in high school. I was a pitcher, so my velocity went from like 82, 83, sometimes 84 my freshman year to like 87, 88 my sophomore year. And I was like, oh, that's significant. That feels good. I think I could probably do something with that. And I, of course, kept getting a little bit better from there on. And that was the first time I thought, oh, I could actually probably play in college. It's not just a desire. And then my junior year or senior year, I started getting some calls from like professional scouts. And that was, again, another moment. I was like, wow, this really actually could happen. And funny story, talking about that was stupid. I had a conversation with a Cardinal scout my senior year, and he said, hey, what would it take for you to sign a professional contract? And I said, probably about $500,000. And he literally responded by saying, all right, we'll talk to you later, and hung up. I never talked to him again. And so I thought I was worth a little bit more than what he thought. And I didn't get drafted out of high school, so needless to say. But it was during those times where I was like, man, this actually could be a possibility, which of course just made me want to work harder and actually go for it.
And so then where did you go to college?
The University of Arkansas. So
okay.
I grew up about 45 minutes south of the campus, and I had gone to a number of camps, growing up there, and loved it. For a little while, there's a chance I was going to go somewhere else, but I really wanted to go to Arkansas, and ended up playing there from 2011 to 2013, and I had a pretty successful career. And that was another point, when I was like, okay, I could really actually play professionally. Is I got to college and had success. Sometimes you get to college, you don't have success. That's just part of it. But I did, and so I was like, okay, this really could happen for me.
And so the whole time you're thinking, I mean, with each step you take, right, there seems to be confirmation. Yep. It's like, yes, all right, so yes, this dream, this is what I'm doing. So then bring us to getting drafted. What's that like, and how did that happen?
Well, I was at a Zaxby's when I got drafted. I got a phone call from my agent saying, hey, you just got drafted, by the Brewers, and it's such a surreal moment. Because at the same time you're met with like, oh, this is super cool. I got drafted in the 17th round, which is, kind of right there in the middle of the pack. There's part of me at the same time you get this moment of like, oh, this is awesome. You're also met with, at least for me, oh man, I wish I would have been drafted higher, but as if that, like as a kid, if you would have told me I got drafted, I'd be like, oh, that's super awesome. As a junior in college, you tell me I get drafted in the 17th round. I'm like, well, why wasn't it the 12th round? That kind of thing. But you're met with all these different emotions, including, well, what happens next, and what do I do, and all that stuff. But you're also trying to stay in the moment and enjoy your fried chicken at Zaxby's, and it's just kind of a whirlwind of emotions that when, and I think I wish, one of the things I wish, looking back on my career, I would have done was enjoy moments a little bit more, if you know what I'm saying. It was always like, okay, what's next? How do I keep getting better? Or how do I, improve? This is not good enough. And so I think there's part of me that wishes I could have gone back and just say, hey, just really enjoy the fact that you you accomplished a dream, that at the very basic level. And so, but it's just a whirlwind of emotions, because I think about a week later, I was on a plane going to Montana, and then that's another whole thing. Like, what do I do here in Montana? I don't have a car, all that kind of stuff. So it was interesting and it was a great time, honestly.
So your relationship with God is going to come, into focus here pretty quickly. But what would you say your relationship with God was kind of during this time?
Yeah. So I became a Christian my freshman year in college, and I had grown up in church, and I knew enough to know that I knew Jesus died on the cross. I knew that God loved people, and I knew I was messed up. And I didn't know how those three things worked together. I just knew that those three things were true. And part of that, my moral good kid kind of facade kind of got broken down my senior year in high school through some relationships, and I just realized I was a messed up kid. And so, but I knew those three things going into college, and I was aggressively trying to figure out how they work together. And I was reading the Bible more than I ever had, trying to pray more. I was going to Bible studies. I agreed to meet with like some older mentor type guys just to figure out what's going on. And eventually, the FCA director shared the gospel with me, Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus. And it opened up my eyes to this reality that all the things that I was doing to try to earn my way to God, I just simply couldn't, that it was by faith that we were saved and made right before God. And that, I didn't realize it, but that's what I was longing for, was to be made right with God. And, he shared the gospel, and I gave my life to Christ. And I like to tell people I did a 180 pretty quick, and then I did another 180 pretty quick, and kind of went back to some of the stuff I was doing. But thankfully, by God's grace, that was a short period of time. And man, at this time, the time that we're referring to, college, professional baseball, all I really wanted was to see teammates come to Christ. Like, I had a mentor who taught me how to share the gospel pretty early on. And I went from like an introverted kid or introverted, insecure, however you want to say it. I was both. And so I wouldn't really talk to folks, to the guy who was like, I don't care who you are, I'm going to talk to you about the faith and have conversations with you. And so that was really on the forefront of my mindset or my mind. And I wanted to play baseball, but I also really wanted to see people come to faith in Christ. So I was, at the time I got drafted, I was really excited from a professional standpoint, but also really excited just to encounter a new group of guys that I could potentially, share the gospel with and lead to faith in Christ, disciple, all that kind of stuff. I found out it's much more difficult in pro ball than it was in college to actually build relationships like that. But that really was on the forefront of my mind. And I credit that to the guys that poured into me, that gave me just a biblical worldview and taught me how to share the faith. Because I think a lot of times for us as Christians, and I've learned this since, like, I think a lot of Christians genuinely want to be people who share the gospel, who want to be people who have a biblical worldview, but no one's taught them how to have that or to do that. And so I was very, very fortunate, and God was very faithful to just me as an individual to give me guys who poured that into me right away. I mean, I've been a Christian for 6 months, and they're like, hey, here's how you share the bridge illustration, or here's how you do this with this teammate, and I'll go try it. And so I'm super grateful for that.
So what was life like? I mean, you watch baseball movies like Bull Durham or, whatever. What is life like as a young man in, in minor league baseball system? And especially as a Christian young man.
Yeah. It's really an interesting thing, because you're kind of just living life on the road. You basically stay in a suitcase, for 6 to 8 months at a time. And there are a lot of components that are really difficult. You're really isolated. In college, the reason why I say college was easier to build relationships, like, gospel type conversation relationships in pro ball was, because in college you're there. Like, at least at this time, college sports have changed dramatically since I played college sports. But at least at that time, once you got to campus, you knew pretty much everybody there was there for 3 to 4 years. So you had time to build these relationships. In pro ball, man, I remember one teammate I had, he pitched in the game. We got back to, it was a road game. We got back to our locker room back in our hometown. And then I never saw him again because he got released that night after everybody left. Like, he got called into the coach's office, and then I've literally not seen him since. And so it's real interesting, like the dynamics. Everybody's fighting for this position, the next level up, whatever the case may be. And everybody genuinely cares about one another. But at the same time, you all know that you're not going to be there very long. Either the season's going to end and you're all going to be on different teams next year. Mostly, some there's always a core group of guys that move up, with each other. But you don't know if you're going to get released or get cut. And so it's really isolating from a friendship standpoint because everybody's trying, but it's so temporary. But also as being a Christian, there was maybe 5 guys who would say, yeah, I'm a Christ follower. Maybe one guy who would actually be following Christ. And my first task, if you will, the first thing that I realized, this is what I'm going to be praying, is for someone to come to faith, like, so that I could have a Christ following friend, and another, because there's a couple guys that I knew, followed Christ. But so it's just an interesting, different dynamic. You're away from local church, and you pretty quickly, at least for me, I don't know how other folks were, but I pretty quickly realized, like, I'm sacrificing a lot of things to be able to do this dream. Time with family. I got married after my first half season. So I got drafted in June or July, whatever the draft is, played like a 3-month season in Montana, and then came home and got married. And so, and then I left in February for spring training, and didn't really, I saw my wife maybe once a month after that, and until the season ended. And so paid less than I thought I would as when the dream developed, Yeah, you go.
You didn't get that. Did you get the $500,000 bonus?
No. I did not get the $500,000 bonus. That it was a long way away from that $500,000 bonus. But yeah, it's so interesting when it comes to professional baseball and money. As a kid, you're like, I don't care about the money. I just want to play baseball. Then you get to like high school, college, and you're like, okay, this could be really lucrative, because they're handing out some pretty big contracts. And then you get to pro ball and you're like, it's not lucrative at all. I'm getting $1,000 a month and for 6 months, and that's it. And they've done a lot since I've played to like change that. They're compensating minor league baseball players better than they were when I played, and certainly better than they were 30 years ago. I heard some of those stories of guys who played 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And like, yeah, we got a stick of gum for throwing 9 innings one night. So enjoy your $1,000 a month. And so it's just, so you pretty quickly you realize, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be, but you still got this dream that you're willing to do whatever it takes to get to. And so it was a mixed bag of, you realize you're sacrificing a lot. It's going to be a lot harder than you thought it was going to be. And there's a lot of, is this worth it or not? And at least for me, some guys don't feel that, but because for various reasons, but I felt that. I was like, is this worth it to actually pursue? And I always concluded that the answer was yes, because of the potential payoff of what, not just a money thing, but like the dream, getting to play professionally, all that kind of stuff.
When did you start having those questions though?
After my first half season, as soon as I started playing. In fact, I had a buddy who, he had a much better half season than I did. He got drafted. We were in the same league, I believe, and he was a closer, and he had 13 saves, basically didn't give up any runs, and he retired after that first half season. And his reasoning was, this is not like college ball. Like I love college ball. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't like this. And And that, I don't think that had anything to do with the system. I just think that, part of what sports is the team component. And when we were at Arkansas, we actually had a chance to play in Omaha, like for College World Series. We finished third 1 year, and my buddy was on that team. There's just such a camaraderie as a team. And then when you get to pro ball, there is a team component to it, and you do get close to people, but it's still a very individual, especially in minor leagues, individualistic thing. Once you get to pro ball, it's team stuff. And some organizations do a great job of making the whole thing feel like a team. But yeah, I had a buddy retired right away after a very successful season. And so right away I felt like, man, is this actually worth it? And then actually one of the pastors at the church that will be going to now with my new job, my wife was living with he and his wife in San Francisco at the time, and knew I was contemplating quitting, retiring. And his advice was, hey, you do know that once you retire, you're never playing again, right? And I hadn't thought about that before, before that moment. And so when he said that, I was like, you're right. I'll never play again. And so that kind of re-energized me to continue on and stick it out and say, okay, this is worth it, because it's all I've ever wanted to do. And I still want to do it. So I'm going to keep going no matter how hard it is.
So how many years were you in pro ball?
It was about 2.5 total, because right after that, after my first half season, when I almost quit and then kept going, I basically got hurt right after that. And so I'm like, man, I'm fired up. I'm ready to go make it to the big leagues. And then I got hurt. And so I didn't get to stay in there super long. And I'm truthfully grateful for that in some ways, saddened. I think one of the quotes that was most helpful to me at that time, I think John Piper said it. He said, sometimes you have to grieve and cry over the things that didn't happen the way you thought they were going to, and then just move on. Basically, I got that way wrong. So don't quote me quoting Johnny Piper there, because
Johnny P.
Johnny P. I call him. I didn't know if I could call him Johnny P. I call him Johnny P all the time. Not his face. Never met him, but I was way wrong on that. But that was profoundly helpful, because I was genuinely sad that it didn't work out the way I thought it was going to, but also at the same time, really, really grateful, because I would not be the person, individual, the Christ follower, the husband, now the dad. I wouldn't be any of those things if I would have kept playing that I am today. I think the Lord would have been faithful to grow me and shape me and mold me while I was in that. But looking at who I am now, I know that there's been some unique things I've been able to grow in that I wouldn't have been able to playing professional baseball.
Well, I can't say for sure that if John Piper listens or reads, listens to this podcast or reads Dear John, but I know his daughter does. So
hey, there you go.
Talitha, hello.
Yes.
You can maybe make a connection there.
Yeah. Let him know we call him Johnny P.
And maybe, yeah, let him know we call him Johnny P, and we need that quote. Because we don't want to get around. So 2.5 years, what was your final? So now walk us through, hey, you know what? I'm hanging this up.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to hang this up and then what?
Yeah. So it was May of 2015 when I came to the conclusion that actually being in professional baseball wasn't going to work. And I say it that way for a specific reason I'll get to, but basically I'd gotten hurt. I went to spring training hurt, which I could expound for days on why the reason I went to spring training hurt was stupid. Like I messed up a whole lot of stuff in that, but I went to spring training hurt, and I was making per diem. Basically that was my salary, it was per diem, and it was about $400 a month. And I was in Arizona. My wife was in Arkansas. Her job hadn't started yet. She was going to be a teacher in the fall. But it's May, and I'm making $400 a month, and a large percentage of that, that's for food, right? So it's basically it came down to either pay the bills, eat, or see my wife. And I could really only pick one of those. It wasn't even like pick 2 out of 3, it's pick one. And so I was hurt. there was potential I was going to have surgery. I had torn the Tommy John ligament, the UCL there in my elbow. And it got very apparent that it wasn't going to work for me to be there. And I actually asked the Brewers to release me. I said, hey, can you cut me formally so that I can continue the opportunity to play? And they didn't want to release me like that, which made sense from a business standpoint. They're like, no, we're not just going to release you so you can go play for somebody else potentially. And so the decision was basically I needed to retire to be able to go home. And my every intention was to go home, get healthy on my own, train as if I were going to play the next year, which saying this all aloud, you're like, Brandon, this is not a good idea. It wasn't. But
this is stupid.
Yeah. So from May until January of 2016, I did everything possible. Like everything, like literally I read on the internet, which is always true, that that lentils have a component to them that help repair ligaments. And so you know what I did? I threw some lentils in a pot, made some up, and literally had like a bowl of lentils, not lentil soup, not lentils mixed in with anything else. I had a bowl of lentils. And the problem was I forgot to rinse them off. So it really just tasted like dirt. And yeah. But you know what? I was so committed to getting healthy. Like I didn't even care. I just ate them. And it was again, so stupid. But I got all that to say, I got to the point where I was as healthy as I'd ever been physically. I cut out all dessert, like really anything unhealthy. I cut it out. I got as strong as I ever had been. And mentally, I had worked on the mental component of the game significantly as well. And in January, I'd step back up to throw again and off the mound. And I was throwing 86 miles per hour, which is very slow when it comes to a guy in my position. I couldn't throw a strike, and my elbow still hurt. And I called.
Had you had the surgery?
No, I did not have the surgery. No, I just decided I'm going to rehab it on my own. And I thought I was getting stronger and everything was getting right. And I was eating all my lentils. So I thought maybe this thing's repaired itself, And so I did that, and I called a scout friend of mine, and I told him the situation, told him where I was at with velocity, all that stuff. And he took a long, deep breath, not a short one, a long one, and said, Brandon, if you want to play again, you need to be throwing 96 in 3 weeks. And I sat there for a second, and you know what my response was? All right, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to figure it out. And so I thought I was going to go from 86 to 96 in less than a month, which doesn't happen. Like, that's not a real thing. And by God's grace, it was during that time, our church was leading us through 21 days of prayer and fasting. And I was doing a paper route to save money or to make money.
Wow.
To try to fund this dream. And so I'm driving around from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. basically. And my fasting was I was fasting from social media while driving during the paper route, which is, bad in general. But when it's 3 a.m., nobody's on I got pulled over by a drunk guy one time. He told me my tail light was out. And so that was quite fascinating. But
wait, you got pulled over by a drunk
guy?
Not
a police officer, a drunk guy. I was in a neighborhood, just passing out papers, and this guy like waves me down and pulls up next to me and just lets me know my tail light's out. And then he proceeds to tell me the history of the whole neighborhood. It's 3 a.m. I was like, brother, I've got a job to do. You need to get home. So it was quite a fascinating time. But so my fast was I wasn't going to be on social media, and I wasn't going to listen to music while I was driving. I was just going to, the only thing I was going to listen to was the scripture, and, or nothing at all. And so it's January 12th of 2016. And I was listening to Proverbs chapter 12, and within that chapter, there's a passage that basically says the foolish man chases after worthless desires, but the wise work their field. And as soon as I heard that, and listen to that. It wasn't, I don't think I didn't hear an audible voice, like a outside audible voice, but it was a pretty loud, aggressive stop, like so loud and in my spirit that I literally stopped my car. Like I put the car in park. I was like, what's going on? And the Spirit said, stop. You need to stop chasing after worthless desires. And I don't think the dream that I had started out as worthless, but from May 2015 to January 2016, I was basically choosing the path of worthlessness. Like there was so much value that came out of that, and I can share that briefly. But what I mean by worthlessness was like my dream had turned into a fantasy. Like it was not a realistic thing for me to go back and play professional baseball, but I was like living in a fantasy land that thought I could make it back. And looking back, if I would have continued down that path, I mean, the damage that I could have done relationally with family and all, and just in general, living in a fantasy land is not good for anything. Relationship with God, family members, anything like that, your own personal self. And so the Spirit literally stopped me. And I went home that day, 6 a.m., woke my wife up and told her I was retiring. I was officially retiring from professional baseball. And her response was, so does that mean you can quit the paper route? I said, yes, I can quit the paper route now. And I put my 2 weeks notice in, and my manager was like, are you sure you want to do this? Because you've got quite the career in paper delivery. You don't miss. I was like, well, I was a professional pitcher. I should not miss the driveway. And I said, I'm out of here on this one. And so I retired from professional baseball and paper delivery in the same night.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. I don't know which one of those is the bigger loss. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Dreams there that both went down the drain, for sure.
I think you bring up something really good and interesting that's worth exploring, because when we think about the path that God wants us to take and God's will and God's sovereignty and how that we believe He has a plan for our lives, I think sometimes we can become so binary with it that it's like, okay, well, God said, which obviously He opened doors for you to play professional baseball, right?
Yep.
And because He did that, then I'm going to chase this until there's, you talk about beating a dead horse, until like that horse is pulp, right? And yet I think what your story shows us is that it's not just black and white like that. Yes, God opened those doors, and I think probably, right, the desire and the practice you got sharing the gospel and those experiences are all going to have impacted you and are going to impact you, especially in what you're doing as you're helping kids. But yet there are times where God will then close those doors on something that He gave us and blessed us with.
Yep.
And I think your story shares that. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, to a degree. And I think I was not okay with that. I think that was the hardest thing, that like everybody around me knew I should have stopped playing. Like in May when I retired, like every time I told somebody, a mentor, family member, like, hey, I'm still going. Looking back, I recognize those looks now of like, are you sure that's what you should be doing? And I was just not okay with God changing the plans on me, is a simple way to put it. But yeah, I was just so black and white. I was like, man, this is what God designed me to do. So this is all I can do. And that did lead to a really difficult time for me. And it took several years for me to be okay with the reality that something can be good and end. Like my thought was like, well, if it's good, it'll just last forever. And that's not the way of the kingdom we're in now. Like maybe like the ultimate picture of that is like when we get to heaven, the kingdom of God is good and will last forever. But everything here is just so partial, it's not going to last forever. But I was not under that impression when I started out. I was like, no, thing's going to last forever. And I thought my motives were good in playing. That was a hard part too, because part of the thing that I wrestled with was like, okay, God, your word literally says to make disciples of all nations. And that summer prior, I had I learned Spanish to try to share the gospel with our Spanish speaking teammates. And I played with guys from 12 countries, and most of them spoke Spanish. And so I picked up Spanish to learn how to speak Spanish. There's a funny story about that. The word for sin is pescado. The word for fish is pecado. Or maybe backwards. I think I maybe got it backwards. But regardless, I told one of my buddies that his fish separated him from God. And that was the last time that I said, I promise I'll get it right next time. And that was pretty much our last conversation like that, because he was just so confused. And there was no way to like clarify the confusion, because I was very much in the second language. So
he's like, first of all, how'd you know I have fish back home?
Right.
And he's like, could you leave the fish out of this, please?
Yes. My fish. What's wrong with my fish? So yeah. So anyway, I thought, like, God, I'm here to make disciples, and I'm honoring you with the gifts that you gave me. So why would you take this away? And now looking back, I'm like, yeah, I see why. Not because I had any ill motive or I was sinful in my desire, but I would not be who I am today if I were to continue doing that. And it's good. It's been good, And so, but yeah, I couldn't see past. I just thought it was going to last forever, and it just that's not true about anything that's in this world, and especially a sport like baseball that in literally a moment your career can end. And so, but I couldn't quite wrap my mind around that at that time.
I love that. Good things can end, right? And
Yep.
God can end, good things and seasons, right? Which even in your case is like, literally, right? You have seasons in sports, right? But this season in your life. Mm. So you retire. How do you end up teaching spiritual formation and we've talked a lot about that was stupid moments, right? Like, is there that was stupid moment where it's like, okay, leaving baseball behind and now I'm going to become a pastor?
Yeah, no, that was it was definitely not I walk out, I the next morning wake up and have this realization I'm supposed to be a pastor. No, I was actually just sharing this in a previous conversation. The school that I'm working at now, I was a substitute teacher in, because again, I have no means of making money. So I'm substitute teaching, and the Lord called me to ministry in one of the classrooms here at this school. So it's a really kind of cool full circle moment now that I'm getting to work here. But I just literally had no idea. When I say that all I wanted to do is play professional baseball, that means all of my time went to to baseball. I didn't develop any other skills. I didn't develop any other desires or passions or anything like that. In fact, anything that would have been a passion or desire, I write a lot now. We met on Substack, started an art blog and all that stuff. And all I want to do is write. Like, I love to write. And I would say I loved to write in high school as well. But when the options came to like writing anything versus going to play baseball, like that one always won. And so I get out of a professional baseball with basically no skills, no desires, not sure what any other desires or possibilities there are for me. And I had a really hard time.
Because you technically didn't finish college, right?
No, I still had not finished college. Yeah, so I still had college to do. And so I did 2 classes, what I had left. But my degree is in rec and sport management, which was fine. And lots of people do things with that. But I knew that I didn't want to. I got the degree so I could play baseball, is kind of how it was for me. And so, yeah, in fact, I took a test one time, like shortly after I retired, or right around the time I was say, okay, this is probably got to change. And it was like a personality, skills, and gifts, or like desires test. And the result I got was that I should be a midwife. Yeah. So just imagine 24-year-old Brandon. At this time I was still training. I'm like, okay, my career's probably over. I need to figure out what to do next. I have no idea. So I finished my paper route. I get home, open up my computer, take this test and it says midwife. What do you do with that? Like,
that's got to be a little depressing, right? I mean, you're like, here I am, pro baseball player.
Yep.
Yeah. And you're like, and then it says,
and listen,
you need to be a midwife.
You need to be a midwife. And thankfully, I did not take that test as a sign from God. Now, here's the thing. I didn't know anything about babies or having babies at that time. All respect to midwives, truthfully. I would never be a midwife. Like, that's not in the cards for me. And so, yeah, that was a little depressing. So I had no idea what was going on in my life, but the Lord is faithful. And I was reading through actually Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper. And it's actually the only book I've ever read by him. The rest of them are much thicker. I haven't quite made it through all of those. And so I stick to the shorter books, but read that one. And part of that was because I just literally, I didn't want to waste my life. And at that point I had no direction. So I was like, I'm going to waste everything because I don't know where I'm going. And so I read that, and that one of those chapters in conjunction with Ephesians chapter 4, which is kind of the passage I was studying, the Lord just made it very clear to me that what I was supposed to do was to equip saints for the work of ministry, and that would be the next phase of my life. And I didn't know what all that meant. I certainly didn't think that meant like being a pastor or whatever. I just didn't know. I didn't have any context for that. Because in fact, the first thing that I did was I applied for a school of ministry program at the church that we attended. And the reason I did that, it was not even because I was trying to do some residency I still hadn't even graduated college. Like I had not gone to church every Sunday or even 75% of Sundays ever, because I was always traveling for baseball. Here I am, God's calling me to ministry, but I had never even gone to church really, like on a super consistent basis. And so I was like, well, I should probably figure out what church is before I try to go do some seminary, theological education or whatnot. And so I did that residency, and I'm really grateful for it. It was really helpful for me. But yeah, from there, it was just like, I have no context for anything else. I just got to kind of pick up the pieces and trust that Lord will lead me with decision-making, from that point.
And so what were people saying around this time, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea is taking chances and in a sense proving everyone wrong. But I think it's interesting because your first, if you will, that was stupid moment where everyone was kind of sitting around saying that was stupid was actually you not retiring.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was.
And then how were people reacting, when you get that call on your life from God to equip saints?
Yeah, it was definitely a mixed reaction, because some of those folks who were like, hey, you should probably have retired a lot sooner, they were also pastors, men's ministry leaders, all that stuff. And so when I told them, they're like, yeah, we've thought this for a long time, that potentially you would be called to ministry. But on the other side of things, I grew up in a Catholic home, and I go home to tell my family, like, hey, I think I'm called to ministry. And their only context for like pastoral ministry is a priest. And I was already married at that point. So like I was, in their brains, I'm disqualified. They don't know how that kind of operates. And so you got those two, which they were very supportive. It just was like initially like, wait, that doesn't make sense to us. And then, so you got the ministry leaders who were excited. You've got some family that were confused. Then you've got all these people, like I said, I like to write. So even then I would write Facebook posts. A lot of what I was doing was very public. And I publicly announced that I was officially done playing. And I'm grateful I did that, but also it was really challenging because no one around me knew how to respond. Like, they knew I was really sad because I was open about how sad I was about it. And that's probably the part that I wish I would have held on to, because I didn't know what it would do to me after retiring. So I tell them, I make this post like, hey, this is really hard, but I'm officially done. And a lot of the people who like I would interact with at church on a regular basis, I just really stopped interacting with them. Like, they stopped coming up to me, we just stopped interacting. And that was the hardest part for me, because here I am losing everything and also losing my friends. Now, where I would look back and say, Brandon, you were being stupid, is because what I didn't know about myself was I was slipping into literally a clinical depressed state because I'm losing everything in my life. And I was getting upset with people because they didn't know how to handle someone who was clinically depressed. I was expecting normal, untrained, non-counseling people to know how to handle me in my most vulnerable state. And that's just not reality, And so there were so many things happening all at once that I wish I would have not been as honest. I'm really super honest, out in the open about a lot of stuff. I wish I would not have been at that time. I wish I would have said, hey, I'm retiring. That's it. But I think because I was so open, people didn't know what to do with that. And I just kind of went into this isolated spot, and I didn't know what to do, with all that. And so there was just a mixed responses. And I remember one guy came up to me, and I cry almost every time I think about it. I probably won't right now, but who knows? I might. But he came up to me. He said, Brandon, I just want you to know that that I like to talk to you because you're my friend, not because you're a baseball player. And I gave him the oh, hey, thanks, man, I appreciate it. And I'm crying, of course. So, but that was so impactful. And I literally saw him just the other day. He's a good friend. That was so impactful because up until that point, and especially when I saw a lot of folks not come up and talk to me, looking back, like I said, they were not talking to me because they didn't know how to handle somebody clinically depressed, which is normal. I took it as they didn't want to talk to me because I wasn't what they thought I was going to be, a professional baseball player. So in that moment, I was like, man, this dude really cares about me. And so him saying that was really a launching pad towards healing for me, I think, because it helped me believe that somebody cared about me. There's at least one person that cared about me as an individual, not me as a baseball player. And then slowly, I had to learn that again about my wife. She did nothing that ever indicated she only loved me because I was a baseball player. I'm chasing fantasies here. So in my brain, the only reason people care about me is because I'm a baseball player. So therefore I got to go get it. So I had to relearn that my wife loved me, that I had to relearn that my family loved me and cared about me. I had to relearn that God loved me and cared about me. And so I think we talk about this, the concept of that was stupid. I didn't have a ton of people around me look at me and say, hey, why? It wasn't like I was climbing the ladder professionally, I could look at my buddy who retired after his first half season, bro, that was stupid. You could be in the big leagues. But for me, it wasn't like I'm going this way. I'm going this way. But what was stupid for me was all of the ways that I responded. And not stupid in the sense that I look back, I'm mad at myself. But if I were counseling me then, I'd be I would be able to give me so much more perspective that I just didn't have at that point. And so I was making decisions, believing things, believing lies, so many lies that I believed. That I could look back and say, man, that was stupid. You don't believe that. That's just simply not true. And so that was kind of the fallout from that time. And by God, and the reason why I know that I wouldn't be the person I am today without retiring is because really the next 3 years, 3 to 4, and even still to this day sometimes, the Lord will show me things about myself that are a result of having sinful things about myself that are a result of having baseball as an idol in my life. And
wow,
I would have never in a million years seen any of that while I was playing, because I genuinely believe this. God was my God after I became a Christian. I loved God. I wanted to follow him and serve him, but there was a whole lot of mixing with baseball worship that I just wasn't even aware of. And I think it took me being out of that for God to actually show me that.
So I think that's a great segue to the final question that I like to ask everyone. Maybe this is a 2-part question. first of all, I guess, what would your advice be? You know, I think I live in Frisco, Texas, right? The mecca of suburbia,
Yeah.
where every parent thinks that their kid is going to be either a professional baseball player, professional football player, you know, professional soccer player. And I'm looking at some of these kids, I'm like, bro, that kid ain't growing that much. You know, like, but what's
you
your
doing that?
yeah. What's your advice to young people and parents when it comes to pushing your kids in sports? And then the second part would be what is the overarching lesson of your That Was Stupid story?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say to parents, you know, there's nothing wrong with people playing athletics, obviously, and there's so many benefits actually to, you know, team sports and individual sports and the training, the discipline, all the stuff that comes with it. And I've seen this because even while I was playing and then after, you know, I did a lot with youth sports. If your child in any way, in any small way, can sense that your love for them is dependent on their performance, then you've got a major problem. And sometimes that can flesh itself out because your dreams for them are bigger than their dreams for them. And you push them constantly. I know you got to get this scholarship or that. And the reality is, like, especially in baseball, I made it to the 0.1%, and I was making $1,000 a month, you know, traveling on buses.
Wow.
And so, like, outside looking in, I made it, but from my perspective, I didn't make it. I was not close. I still had several levels to go to. And so, but I made it to the 0.1%. So to think that our kids are going to make it to a professional level to play a sport just because we invest a lot of time in it is not true. It will be true for a very, very small portion of it. But just the reality is, like, it's probably not going to be true. So if the child thinks that in any way your love for them is dependent on their success or their performance, what's going to happen is they're going to grow up believing that they got to perform for love, and that's not good for the gospel. That's not true according to the gospel message. And I think most parents say, well, that's not actually true in my relationship with my kid. But they need to know that. They need to really feel that and know it at a heart level. And looking back, like, I think my parents did a really great job of loving me. And I think because I invested so much of my life into baseball, like, I chose to believe people would only love me if I performed. Like, I brought that on. And so there's some things as a parent you can't control, but I do think there's some things that you can control, and what those things are helping a child, like, intentionally know that they're loved, that as a person they're cared for. And I would especially say, just from a practical standpoint, make sure your kids got some other hobbies, and make sure they develop in skills and they become a total person, not just an athlete. Because there really are. There's some folks who, like, you know, like in some sports, in order to be successful in that sport, you got to actually drop out of school. Like, you got to be homeschooled, and you got to travel around and do that. And I get it. Like, I 100% get it. Because if given the opportunity, if baseball was one of those sports, I would have done it. I would have been homeschooled because I wanted that dream. But I think overall, everything in this world is passing away. And so the only time you're going to experience true peace is when you're living for things that don't pass away. And I didn't realize it, but when you make every decision based off of, in my case, baseball, what that means is you're worshiping baseball. So if like, even as a family, if we're making every decision based off a kid, well, that means we're worshiping that kid. Whatever we center our lives around, that's what we're worshiping. Whether we say we're worshiping God or not, that's what we're worshiping. And so I think taking a step back as a family unit and saying, okay, we can invest a lot of time in sports, but it's not going to get every decision. We're not centering our life on this, because any sport, anything other than God makes a really bad God. And so the question, and what I would challenge parents with is how do you creatively do sports well, because you want to honor the Lord with gifts and you want to build relationships in those spaces and all that kind of stuff. But also, how do you creatively center your life around the Lord Jesus Christ and his kingdom? Because that's your home. Like, that's reality, And so I think that would be my charge to parents. And let your kids know how hard that is to do. Because if you think about it from a kid's perspective, if every weekend you're out playing tournaments or whatever and you're missing church, this is really practical, but you never talk about it. Like, you never say, hey, this is tough that we're missing church. We don't like it. We don't know what to do. We're trying to figure this out. If you never say something like that, then the kid's going to grow up thinking, well, I can just abandon church for anything that I like. Like, if you let them know how hard of a decision it is, they start to feel like, oh, this is not coming without some costs. Like, we're having to sacrifice something here. And then anytime like when I was playing professional baseball and I knew, okay, I'm sacrificing time with my wife, what that meant, when I knew it, I felt that, it made me say, okay, I got to get creative about how I do spend time with her when I can. And so just from a practical standpoint with church and sports and missing all that kind of stuff, like, if a kid knows and a family knows, okay, we're really sacrificing a lot, it's a easy segue into, okay, well, then let's get creative. Let's get strategic about how we actually worship the Lord, even though we're out this Sunday from church. And it's not all about going to church, but that's a huge part about following Jesus. And so I know it's a long answer to what I would say to parents, but I think sports is such a good thing in some respects, but it has become kind of a national idol, even from the top down. Like, all the major sports industries are more successful than they've ever been. And youth baseball is like $1 billion industry, And so, like, and that could be another thing, like, parents, like, the whole organization, they don't care about your kids. Like, some of them do. Some individual coaches really care about kids, but it's an industry, just like anything else is an industry, And in some ways, like, it's special to find like a company in the business world that really cares about their employees. There's a lot of companies that were like, yeah, it's just bottom line, a lot of turnover. Individuals don't really matter. Right. The same could be said about youth sports. Like, it's a bottom line in a lot of cases. And so the question we have to ask is, like, do I want to subject my 6-year-old to this, like, industry of people who really don't care about little Timmy in the holistic sense? Now, you may have a great coach that cares, obviously, but from a holistic standpoint, we just can't say that youth sports fully cares about the full person. It's just impossible. So then to throw them into that, wrap them up in that world, I think just it could be done differently and better, probably. But I think the thing that I could learn from my entire story of making a lot of stupid decisions is a lot of my stupidity came from believing lies. I just didn't believe what was true, like, so often, especially in that season, but even now, like, if there are times where I'm short with my wife, it's because a lot of times I've started to believe some lie that she's doing this or that and she doesn't care about this or that. That's just not true. Like, and when I tell her that, she's like, no, that's not true at all. And so when I look back to the season post-retirement, navigating all those waters, it was like I was existing in this web of lies that needed to be untangled for me to actually see clearly. And I wish I would have had the foresight from day one to be like, no, I'm going to believe what's true no matter what. And so, like, when I'm laying in the trainer's room, like when I was playing, one of the things that I had to do every single morning was, because when I was hurt, I was on a rehab basically assignment, and I had to get to the park in Arizona at 5 a.m. or even earlier sometimes. I would lay there in the trainer's room and I would lie to myself. I would say, this is worth it because I might play in the big leagues. This is worth it. It was super hard. This is worth it because I might play in the big leagues. I wish I would have even just gone back and told myself, like, hey, brother, this might not be worth it. Like, it's going to end probably, and you may look back on this day and it may not be worth it. But you're going to give everything you've got today. Like, I wish I would have told myself the truth, not told myself lies to just like make it through. Because even now I see that in myself. It's so easy. I so quickly avoid the truth when it's hard. And I think that's why I'm, potentially when I write or when I, speak, I'm so truthful. One, about what God has done in me, the difficult things I've experienced, but also like when I'm counseling one-on-one, like I will tell people the truth. And I think part of the reason why is because when you look at, the kingdom of God is a kingdom of truth. And so there's no point in being content with some lies hanging around, because that's only going to destroy. Like, Satan is the father of lies.
Yep.
And so why would we let those stick around? And yet I built a life on it, like that's the way I felt. And so I'm trying to relentlessly speak truth to myself. And that's why it kind of overflows out of writing and speaking and preaching and all that kind of stuff. But I think if I could look back, if I could go back to 21-year-old Brandon, who's about to get drafted, I think I would tell myself, like, do whatever it takes to believe true things about you, about God, about your career, about the people around you. Do whatever it takes to believe true things. Because like I said earlier, I literally believed that I would play until I died. Like, unless you die on the field, that ain't happening. Like,
right.
Like
right.
LeBron James might play until he dies. He's a different specimen. But most careers end for everybody. Like, even not professional sports, you retire at some point. Like, and so the foundation of my thought process on making it to the big leagues was this total fantasy. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna play forever. And so I wish I could go back and just say, like, hey, do whatever it takes to believe true things, even though that's going to be really tough at times. So that's probably what I would tell myself.
Yeah. Oh man, listen, if the audience are listening to this podcast, like, this one has gone longer than normal, and I think that's great, right? Because I think, especially the stuff that you've just been spitting in a good way, if I can use a rap term.
If you listen to Christian rap
in this second, yeah, kid, it's just so good, right? The advice to parents, the believing the lies, like, this is good stuff. And if I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this on Substack, maybe you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify or wherever, Brandon does have a Substack blog that he writes on, and I love it. And he does little notes that are so profound. So Brandon, if people want to follow you, where do they go to get those good nuggets?
Yeah. It's just Substack, brandonmoore.substack.com. I'm so thankful for Substack. I don't like social media just in general. And Substack has been really helpful for me to actually have social media, but also not what typical social media entails. And so, yeah, I'll do everything on social media on Substack from, weekly on Wednesday. I started actually sharing like more family stuff on Fridays. And so it's literally become my like social media platform. And it's so new that, it's hard to get people to hop on, but I'm on a quest. Like, hey, I'm Substack till I die, I guess. I don't know. But
yeah, you're going to die writing on Substack.
There you go again. Just believe in those lies.
Yeah. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your heart, your story, your lessons. I really would encourage people to follow Brandon and get, his perspective is just great. Best of luck. I know like some Christians don't like saying that, but best of luck as you do this next step in your journey and feed into young people. We'll be praying for you, and I'm so glad that you retired, because I think
too.
we have a chance to talk and now you have a chance to influence others. So thanks for joining us.
Thank
Brandon.
you. And John, I want to encourage you before we hop off, if that's okay. You went public with alcoholism, all that stuff, just a few weeks ago. And I've literally noticed since then a wave of other writers being more honest about issues, struggles, and just honest in general. And man, and you know this, and I know this from the different things that I've shared here. Like the only way to find freedom is through honesty. It's got to be coupled with truth. You can't just be honest and hope for the best, but honesty coupled with truth and grace and forgiveness that comes from Jesus. And so I can tell that you've experienced that, and I can just tell others are looking for that type of stuff. So, kudos to you for starting a wave of honesty, because I think that's where freedom's going to come from. And truthfully, if we're going to, especially in the church, maybe specifically in the church, but especially if we're going to be people who actually live according to the kingdom of God, actually follow Jesus, actually obey him, it's going to be because we're free, not slaves to anything, even the shame that's associated with that thing. Maybe we don't do it anymore, but the shame that comes with it, can keep us in bondage just as much as the other can. So kudos to you, proud of you, if that means anything, but super, super grateful for your writing as well.
No, it absolutely does mean a lot. Because I think in general, the reaction has been good, but some people have struggled.
Yeah. I'm
right?
sure you got
and
some
it's interesting.
those that unsubscribes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But the Lord told me, he said, John, the means by which you're going to live out your identity in me, the specific identities through radical vulnerability, and you're going to be known for your weaknesses. And I'm like, can I be like maybe like you, like whatever my equivalent is of being a professional baseball player? Like, could I be known for that?
I'd prefer
and it's
actually, I said, just joke, like, God, I'd prefer something different, actually, not the weakness.
Absolutely. And so, and then he said, John, because really my alcohol journey really started. I mean, I didn't drink until I was 21. I mean, a little bit, but like with my parents when I was like 15, they're like, hey, you want to, but I didn't drink until I was 21. So, but really the Lord said, you wasted the first 15 years from 21 to 36. He's like, I'm going to redeem the next 15 years.
Wow.
Because it was once I turned midway through my 36th year of life is when I finally said, yep, this is a problem. Lord, I need you. Full surrender instead of full send, full surrender.
And God is so faithful to do that, because that's what he does. He gives us a word from his word that just radically changes things. Like, and it typically only happens when we come to a place of brokenness. But we never let ourselves get there sometimes. Like we believe so many lies that we're like, no, I can't get to a place of brokenness, because what next? What's usually in that place of brokenness that God actually meets us most clearly in his word and literally changes everything.
Absolutely. When you get to that place of surrender, and I totally agree. And I thank you for sharing that part of your story as well. Right. So, man, thank you so much. I think this is the start of just something bigger. I don't know what that is, or just start a relationship, but I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing it. And we'll all be praying for you in this next season.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
I mean, wasn't that incredible? I told you it was going to be incredible. I told you it was going to be long, but I also told you it was going to be incredible. And even like that stuff towards the end, just the lesson that he learned from his That Was Stupid moments, I guess, stories. And I'm finding that more and more, right? Guys, I hope you're liking that. Like I think when I started out this project, I thought we're always going to talk about like one seminal thing. And there have been some things like that, but I think the more and more that we grow and talk to people, it's like everyone has these That Was Stupid moments, some good and some bad, right? And so I'm trying to expand that here in season 2 to talk about some of those stories that are a little different, right? That aren't just, hey, no one thought I could do this, I proved them wrong. But, like Brandon, hey, he should have retired earlier. He's saying that, right? He built his idol around baseball. And so I'm really excited to have his story now as part of the That Was Stupid family of podcasts episodes. So as always, rate, like, subscribe, share. If you have any guest ideas, as always, throw them to guest@thatwasstupid.show. All right, we'll talk to you soon.